on refining metals to oils in alchemy, we start first with the ore, and the ore, which is mined from the ground, is thought to be alive in a way, or you can almost think it's like picking a potato from the ground. It's alive, but it's slowly dying, right? And if the ore is heated to a very high temperature and everything maybe impure is burnt off it, everything like organic and such is burnt off, then you have a mineral, or excuse me, a metal, like a pure metal. And the pure metal is thought to be dead. It no longer has a life force in it. I assume the life force in this case would be, for example, if it were a sulfate mineral, like iron sulfate, it would be the sulfur. If it were a chloride mineral or a fluorite mineral or some kind of other, it's got something tacked onto it, so to speak. I imagine this volatile or semi-volatile component is thought to be the life force. Just a post note, there's this idea of digesting a mineral in its own humidity, so to speak. So if you have an ore that has this other component to it, and you keep it heated, and you crush it and you keep it heated, hypothetically, it could digest itself. Of course, there's other ideas about like channels of alkali or volatile alkali and such, which transform minerals. But otherwise, if everything you can refine into its salt, its oil, and its liquids, right? And for the mineral, it's a little bit more complicated. For plant, you burn the plant and you capture the smoke, and then you've separated it from the non-organic minerals, which is left within the container which you're burning, and then the organic stuff which is coagulated, which is the oils and the liquids, right, that's come off it. For a mineral, I guess technically if you did that with the ore, it would work. You just need a lot of heat to do it, right? Just say if it were a sulfate, you'd have like sulfurous portions and liquids. Believe it or not, you do get liquids of salts, of these like mineral salts and such. And I imagine ores, you do to get like liquids from it, seemingly. So you'd have these oils and these liquids, right? And then in the other container, you'd have just the raw iron oxide or something, right? Which would be the salt. And the alchemists say that the salt is the poisonous component of the mineral. So what they want to do is to get an oil from it. When the oil is it's not as toxic, right? It's very strong. So it gets too much. And of course, toxicity is always about strength. See, I don't think that the salt is poisonous per se. In my experience, it is very poisonous. It makes you quite ill. I'll put it that way. Very, very ill. But it's also incredibly medicinal for legal purposes. Of course, I shouldn't really say that, but pretty much what's happening is that it's a bit like if you've ever eaten a poisonous mushroom. The mushroom is poisonous, but it's because it's incredibly medicinal. It's because it's so powerful within the body. And I'm not talking about a psychedelic mushroom or anything, but in my experiences, like identifying different plants, you can eat something poisonous, right? It's super strong. So potentially, if a tiny little bit of these mineral salts were used, just a tiny bit, it would be like a very powerful medicine, and you wouldn't have to use the oil. But it's fascinating to make this oil. To make an oil from a mineral is a very strange, fascinating thing. And I have a new hypothesis about how these could be made. And it's very simple, actually. Another post note, if you want some stuff to read, check out these 3 links that I've put in my Gab or my Twitter. I'll probably put them down below in the video description as well. There's some good reading there to really understand how these oils are extracted. If you know how to caramelize things in cooking, it seems to be, I believe it's that way. When you heat a piece of meat, when you have a piece of meat, it's not oily, right? It's not, assumably it isn't. It might have fat around it or in it, right? So the actual protein, like the flesh, has fat in it, right? But it's not until you cook it and it just releases all this fat. It's when heat is applied, or when, just say, the onion is caramelized and it starts to give off this like different properties, right? Or sugar is caramelized and it starts to become like a plastic like material, kind of weird plasticky material. I think that usually first you start off with acetate salts, which is vinegar. Vinegar is acetic acid. It's when if you just make like a hydroxide or you electrolyze something, and then you wash the salts out, the colloidal suspension, which is like, it's kind of like powdery, fluffy, weird looking stuff, which is usually your oxide or hydroxide, and you add vinegar to it. Ideally, if you can dry it, you'll make an acetate. And the acetate is kind of like a semi-organic, so to speak. It's like the most, like a semi-organic form of the mineral. It's not a metal, and you can crystallize acetates, but it's vinegar. Vinegar is like an organic chemical, right? So we've taken an organic chemical, organic acid, and we've made the acetate. And my hypothesis is because you're meant to dry distill the acetate, so you get like lots of the crystals. Like I'm talking like hundreds of grams, kilograms even, depending on how much you're making of this. And you cook it, you dry distill it, so you heat it up very hot, and you get it to smoke, and you capture the smoke, and in that smoke is the oils, is acetone and various organic oils, I believe, like phenol compounds or something like that. That's what I've heard it is. And then there's all this stuff where you recombine it, and that's the idea of like the philosopher's stone for the acetate path. But what if you just cooked the acetate salt instead of like dry distilling it? Do you really need to dry distill it, or can you just like cook it? Can you just just heat it up, maybe in a single flask, or just like, it's kind of like a decarboxylation, just heating plants like coffee. You just heat coffee in the oven or roaster or whatever, and it browns, coffee bean, chocolate bean, and then you get the oils. That's how you get the oils of the coffee bean to really come out, and you smell it, and it's like very strong and such. So I'm thinking that heat is this caramelization effect is essentially the creator of this oil, and potentially you don't need to dry distill it. Though of course, I guess if you were dealing with lots of salt, but getting lots of salt is difficult. So if we had small amounts, I think you could like just heat it up, and there'd be different ways. Of course, there are ideas of taking, I think, a mineral and then adding like a hydroxide, like a strong hydroxide to it, and like keeping it heated or warmed, and it like digests supposedly. And you just keep adding hydroxide. That's another one I've heard for certain minerals. Whether that works as well. And then apparently it turns into like a gum, like a resiny, plasticky, like toffee, right? So really, that's what we're trying to do, is trying to get these things into like a state that's like toffee, because then it'll start leaking or releasing oils. Then usually the oils are separated and used as like a remedy, right? Or for other reasons. Supposedly you can even make like gemstones out of the oil, or there's all kinds of weird and interesting things that apparently you can do with it. I don't really know, but it's interesting. So anyway, it's something to try out at least. So I guess we'll see.